Good evening, my friends. What could completely change the direction of the Philadelphia Eagles offense in 2026 is not a new star player, not a blockbuster trade, and not some surprise addition late in the offseason. It may come down to something much more important: whether the offensive line can return to being one of the most dominant units in football. When Eagles fans look back at the 2025 season, one of the biggest frustrations was watching an offense that never seemed to find the same rhythm, confidence, or consistency that it had previously. This was a team that had experienced tremendous success before, including an offense capable of delivering in the biggest moments. There was star power across the roster, the running game had been a major strength, and when pressure mounted, the unit responded. That formula helped produce championship-level football. But after Kellen Moore departed, many concerns quickly became reality. Kevin Patullo was promoted internally to offensive coordinator, and according to the discussion surrounding the team, the offense never reached the level that many expected. The scheme became predictable. It became easier for defenses to anticipate what was coming. Instead of creating advantages, the offense often looked stuck searching for answers. The problems extended beyond the coaching staff. There were visible frustrations throughout the season. A.J. Brown appeared unhappy at times, displaying negative body language that became a talking point among observers. Whether fair or unfair, many felt that the energy surrounding the offense was not where it needed to be. When a unit struggles, frustration often becomes contagious, and that appeared to be part of the story. At the same time, the running game experienced a dramatic decline. Even though Saquon Barkley still surpassed 1,000 rushing yards, the overall efficiency of the ground attack was nowhere near what fans had become accustomed to seeing. The offense that once overwhelmed opponents physically suddenly struggled to establish itself consistently on the ground. The dominance that had defined the Eagles' identity seemed to disappear. Perhaps the most surprising part of the entire decline was where it started: the offensive line. Just 1 year earlier, the Eagles' offensive line had been viewed as one of the most feared groups in football. They controlled games, they wore down defenses, they imposed their will on opponents. But in 2025, the unit simply did not perform at that same level. The challenges started with health. Injuries became a major issue throughout the group. Jordan Mailata was still productive, but even he admitted that the previous season had taken a significant toll on his body. After playing deep into the year and carrying a heavy workload, recovery became much more difficult. Landon Dickerson battled injuries and was not the same player fans had come to expect. Cam Jurgens struggled physically as well, and Lane Johnson missed significant time. When multiple cornerstone players are dealing with injuries at the same time, the effects spread throughout the entire offense. The running game suffers, pass protection suffers, the quarterback faces more pressure, play calling becomes more difficult, everything becomes harder, and Jalen Hurts found himself once again navigating major changes around him. One of the most remarkable details is how many different play callers Hurts has had throughout his football journey. Going into this season, he is preparing to work with yet another voice guiding the offense. Constant changes can create challenges for any quarterback, especially one expected to lead a championship contender every single year. The offense eventually became described as vanilla, boring, and predictable, but when many analysts examined the tape, they continued to come back to the same conclusion. The offensive line was no longer dominating games the way it once did. The statistics reinforced those concerns. The Eagles averaged only 22.3 points per game, ranking 19th in the league. They finished 24th in total yards per game at 311.2. Their 5.2 yards per play ranked 19th. On third downs, they converted only 1% of opportunities. The only area where they remained elite was in the red zone, where they scored touchdowns at an impressive rate once they reached scoring territory. For an offense carrying one of the league's most expensive rosters, those numbers simply were not good enough. Now comes the fascinating part of the story. Despite all the struggles from last season, there is growing belief that this offensive line could bounce back in a major way during 2026. According to Warren Sharp's offensive line rankings entering the season, the Eagles are projected to have the second best offensive line in the entire NFL, trailing only the Denver Broncos. That projection is based largely on the belief that improved health can completely change the outlook of this unit. The logic is straightforward. If Landon Dickerson returns healthier, if Cam Jurgens fully recovers, if Lane Johnson stays on the field, and if Jordan Mailata returns to his previous standard, the Eagles suddenly look very different. There are already encouraging signs. Cam Jurgens has spoken about feeling significantly better after having a full offseason dedicated to recovery. Landon Dickerson has also worked to address lingering physical issues. The hope throughout the organization is that these players can return to being the powerful anchors they were previously. There is also optimism surrounding the offensive scheme itself. Lane Johnson has openly discussed how the new approach could benefit him. The possibility of receiving more help and protection and operating within a system that better suits the personnel could create immediate improvements across the front five. And perhaps most importantly, the Eagles are not abandoning their identity. Even as the scheme evolves, the organization continues to prioritize large, physical offensive linemen capable of winning football games in multiple ways. That philosophy has been part of the Eagles' foundation for decades, and it remains central to their vision moving forward. If this offensive line truly returns to elite form, it could completely transform the offense. The running game could regain its dominance. Jalen Hurts could operate with greater confidence. The entire unit could become far more explosive and efficient. But if injuries continue to pile up and the offensive line struggles again, many of the same problems from last season could return. So Eagles fans, after everything that happened in 2025, do you believe the offensive line will return to being one of the NFL's elite units and become the key reason this offense takes a major step forward in 2026? Leave your comment below. The biggest reason for optimism is that the Eagles are not asking this offensive line to become something it has never been. They are asking it to return to what made it special in the first place. For years, Philadelphia built its reputation around physical football. The Eagles were known for controlling the line of scrimmage, winning battles in the trenches, and making life miserable for opposing defenses. Whether it was a critical third down, a late game drive, or a playoff matchup in difficult weather conditions, the offensive line was usually the foundation that made everything possible. That identity seemed to disappear at times during 2025. Fans watched defenders penetrate the backfield more frequently. Running lanes that used to open naturally suddenly disappeared. Pass protection became inconsistent. Instead of imposing their will on opponents, the Eagles often looked like they were reacting rather than dictating the action. That is why so much attention is being placed on the health of this group entering 2026. When Landon Dickerson is healthy, he has proven he can be one of the most physical guards in football. His ability to move defenders and create space in the running game has been a major part of Philadelphia's offensive success. Last season, however, he was clearly not operating at his usual level. Injuries affected his performance, and the difference was noticeable. The same can be said for Cam Jurgens. At his best, Jurgens provides athleticism, mobility, and toughness in the middle of the offensive line, but last year, he struggled to consistently anchor against defenders. The physical limitations were visible throughout the season. Now, after an offseason focused on recovery, there is hope that Eagles fans will see a much stronger version of him. Then there is Lane Johnson. For years, Johnson has been one of the most reliable and respected offensive tackles in the NFL. His absence is always felt whenever he misses time. The Eagles experienced that reality once again during the 2025 season. Having him healthy for a full year could completely alter the trajectory of the offense. What makes this situation especially intriguing is how the new offensive approach could maximize the strengths of the players already on the roster. Lane Johnson himself has spoken about the benefits of playing in a system that provides additional support. Throughout much of his career, he has frequently been left on an island against elite pass rushers. While he has handled those challenges remarkably well, the opportunity to receive more schematic help could allow him to play even more efficiently. The running game may benefit even more. One of the recurring themes whenever the Eagles have faced offensive struggles under Nick Sirianni has been the realization that the team performs best when it can establish the run. Time and time again, Philadelphia has found success by leaning into its physical identity and allowing the offensive line to control games. The new system appears designed to help accomplish exactly that. Instead of forcing the offensive line into uncomfortable situations, the scheme should work alongside the strengths of the personnel. That is a critical distinction. Great coaching is not simply about implementing a system. It is about adapting a system to maximize the talent available on the roster. The Eagles appear committed to doing that in 2026. Another important factor is that the organization has not abandoned its long-standing philosophy regarding offensive linemen. Around the league, some systems prioritize smaller and more agile blockers. Philadelphia has generally preferred size, power, and physicality. That approach has helped make the Eagles one of the most successful franchises in the NFL over the last 2 decades. The belief inside the organization seems clear. If you dominate the line of scrimmage, you give yourself a chance to win in any situation. Need to grind out a tough victory? The offensive line can help do that. Need to protect the quarterback in a shootout? The offensive line can help do that too. Need to run the football late in a game to protect a lead. Once again, it starts up front. That is why the stakes are so high for this group entering the season. The offensive line is not just another position group on the roster. It may be the single most important factor determining whether the Eagles' offense becomes one of the league's best units again or continues to fight through inconsistency. If Warren Sharp's projection is correct and this becomes the second best offensive line in football, the ripple effects could be enormous. The running game would likely improve dramatically. Pass protection would stabilize. Jalen Hurts would benefit from cleaner pockets and a stronger rushing attack. The offense as a whole could look completely different from what fans witnessed a year ago. Suddenly, many of the concerns surrounding the team would begin to fade. But if injuries strike again, if key players miss significant time, or if the group fails to regain its previous form, then the same questions that haunted the Eagles throughout 2025 could quickly return. That is why this storyline deserves so much attention heading into the season. The talent is there. The experience is there. The pedigree is there. The only thing left is proving it on the field. The Eagles have built their identity around dominance in the trenches for years. Now they have an opportunity to remind the rest of the NFL exactly what that looks like. If this offensive line gets back to playing Eagles football, there is every reason to believe the offense can become one of the most dangerous units in the league once again. And if that happens, the expectations for Philadelphia in 2026 are going to rise very quickly. When a team wins at a high level, expectations naturally rise. That is exactly what happened with Philadelphia. The standard is no longer simply making the playoffs or competing for a division title. The expectation is competing for championships. Because of that, every weakness becomes magnified, and every decline in performance becomes impossible to ignore. That is why the offensive regression in 2025 became such a major topic. The Eagles were not judged against average teams. They were judged against the version of themselves that fans had already seen before. They were judged against an offense that could dominate physically, control the clock, execute in critical moments, and overwhelm opponents with talent and execution. When those elements disappeared, the difference was obvious. One of the most telling details from the season